Billions of human beings living simultaneously, lives stretching past 900 years without effort, and a sentence that defied every logic. Only 8 would survive the flood. Families producing dozens of children across centuries of fertility. This is the story of the biblical numbers behind the greatest human catastrophe ever recorded. Put it in temporal perspective. The text of Genesis establishes a precise genealogical chronology, chapter by chapter, generation by generation. From Adam to the birth of Noah, the sum reaches 1,556 years. Adding the 600 years of Noah's life before the flood begins, you arrive at 1,656 years of human history before the waters covered the earth. Nearly 17 centuries. Time enough for a single lineage to multiply into proportions beyond imagining. And this is exactly where the calculation nobody told you about in Sunday school begins. Consider the ages recorded in Genesis chapter 5. Adam lived 930 years, Seth lived 912, Enos reached 905, Canaan reached 910, Mahalalel attained 895, Jared surprises with 962. Enoch, translated, counted 365 before he was no longer found. Methuselah breaks every human record with 969 years. Lamech, Noah's father, reached 777, and Noah himself lived 950 years, 600 of them before the flood. Look at what this means demographically. Every man on record fathered sons and daughters across centuries of fertility. Adam had, beyond Cain, Abel and Seth, additional sons and daughters, as Genesis 5 verse 4 makes clear. Seth had additional sons and daughters. The text repeats that formula generation after generation. Beyond the name firstborn, there came other sons and other daughters. And this multiplication unfolded not over decades, but across 8 to 9 centuries per individual. Consider the scale of the calculation. When Christian demographers like Henry Morris and John Whitcomb attempted to estimate the world population at the moment of the flood, they started from conservative assumptions. They applied population growth rates comparable to those of the modern world, adjusted for the longevity described in the text. The result was staggering. Morris, in his work published in 1976, calculated that the pre-flood population could have reached between 4 billion and 7 billion inhabitants. 7 billion. Roughly the same number of human beings alive on the entire planet today. All of China, all of India, all of the United States, all of Europe, all of Africa combined. And all of it submerged in a single catastrophe. But the story of how that number emerged from biblical mathematics has yet to be told. Follow the calculation process. Consider a modest population growth rate of 0.5% per year. Under conditions of near millennial longevity, with women fertile for centuries and children born in sequence across generations, that rate is almost laughably conservative. Even so, starting from a single couple, over 1,656 years, the resulting population surpasses 3 billion people. Raising the rate to 1% per year, still lower than Brazil's population growth rate in the 20th century, the number leaps into figures beyond all contemplation. Other researchers adopted more conservative approaches. Minimum estimates speak of 750 million inhabitants. Median estimates cluster around 1 billion to 2 billion. There is no absolute consensus because the biblical text provides no direct census. But every honest projection, based on the genealogical data of Genesis 5 and 6, points to something between hundreds of millions and several billion. And every single one of them died. Notice what this represents in scale. If the intermediate estimate is correct, and pre-flood humanity numbered something like 2 billion people, the flood would have been the most lethal event in history by absolute proportion. For context, the Black Death of the 14th century killed around 200 million people. The Spanish flu of 1918 claimed between 50 and 100 million lives in just over 2 years. World War II, tallying every front and every genocide, reached approximately 75 million dead. The flood, adding up all the estimates, multiplies those figures by factors ranging from 10 to 70 times over. And the execution window was devastatingly brief. Calculate the magnitude of the collapse. Genesis 7 verse 11 records the exact day, the 17th day of the second month in the 600th year of Noah's life. The fountains of the great deep were broken up. The windows of heaven were opened. It rained upon the earth for 40 days and 40 nights. The waters continued rising for 150 days until they covered all the high hills under the whole heaven, 15 cubits above the highest peak, approximately 7.5 meters above what was then considered insurmountable. Think about what happened during those weeks. Billions of human beings, according to the highest estimates, watched the water rise. Entire cities, from which archaeology is only now beginning to uncover fragments, were swallowed whole. Pre-flood civilizations, with their metalworkers, descended from Tubal-Cain, as Genesis 4 verse 22 records, with their musicians descended from Jubal, with their urban settlements initiated by Cain in the land of Nod. All of it vanished beneath the water, and no one survived except the 8. Consider the human scene of those final hours. Entire families clinging to rooftops, to mountains, to trees. Children hoisted high in arms, while parents scrambled for higher ground. Elders of 800, 900 years of uninterrupted life watching centuries of history dissolve in weeks. Established kingdoms, possibly with advanced technologies we will never know, reduced to floating wreckage in a single season. The text does not detail those moments, but the magnitude implicit in the numbers makes it impossible not to envision the landscape of the disaster. And there was something even more disturbing about the composition of that population. Turn your eyes to Genesis 6. The first 4 verses describe a humanity in a phase of accelerated multiplication. And it came to pass, when men began to multiply on the face of the earth, the text says, daughters were born in abundance. The chapter records that all the earth was corrupt, that violence filled the surface of the planet, and that every imagination of the thoughts of man's heart was only evil continually. The description is not generic. It is demographic and moral simultaneously. An enormous population with near millennial longevity, multiplying at an accelerating pace and simultaneously sinking into systemic corruption. The solution created a new problem. The longer God waited, the more people were born. The more people were born, the greater the coming tragedy. Genesis 6 verse 3 establishes a limit, 120 years. The most widely accepted reading among scholars is that those 120 years were the warning period before the flood, during which Noah built the ark while preaching repentance, as 2 Peter 2 verse 5 reaffirms by calling Noah a preacher of righteousness. 120 years of warning, and no one listened except the 8. Consider the work Noah executed during that interval. The ark measured 300 cubits in length, 50 cubits in width, and 30 cubits in height. Converted to modern measurements, this equals approximately 135 meters in length, 22.5 meters in width, and 13.5 meters in height. Internal volume exceeding 40,000 cubic meters. Capacity comparable to 500 modern railway freight cars. Length greater than an official soccer field, plus another half field. A gopher wood structure with 3 decks, internal divisions, a single door, and an upper window. Construction carried out by a tiny family amid the suspicion and mockery of the entire human race. The suffering of construction was not enough. Now came the weight of knowing. Consider the psychological burden on Noah. For more than a century, he announced that the water was coming. He watched neighbors die of old age laughing at him. He watched his sons grow up hearing mockery. He watched the constructions of others prosper, while his continued slowly, plank upon plank, nail upon nail. And he kept at the task because, as Hebrews 11 verse 7 says, moved with godly fear, he prepared an ark for the saving of his household. That fear sustained decades of solitary execution before an indifferent multitude. And while Noah hammered, the population grew. Follow the demographic rhythm of that final century. If pre-flood humanity already numbered in the billions, during the 120 years of ark construction, millions of additional people were born. Every child who came into the world during the construction of that saving vessel was simultaneously one more future victim of the approaching ocean. The paradox is brutal. The time of mercy was also the time of increasing tragedy. The longer judgment was delayed, the more souls there were to lose. And then the door closed. Genesis 7 verse 16 records a detail that many read without noticing, and the Lord shut him in. It was not Noah who sealed the entrance, it was God. That meant two things simultaneously. It meant the salvation of the eight was guaranteed, because a divinely sealed door could not be broken open either by the violence of the waters or by the desperation of those who came pounding at it from outside in the final moments. And it also meant the sentence had been executed. No one could enter anymore. Imagine those last hours. Clouds loading the sky in a way no one alive had ever witnessed. The first rain, because until that moment, according to Genesis 2 verse 5, it had not yet rained upon the earth. Moisture rising from the ground, as it always had, but now also falling from above in ever-increasing volume. People running from the plains to the hills, crowds beating on the door of the ark, perhaps by the thousands, perhaps by the millions in the surrounding area, and the door did not open 40 days. The rain continued falling for 40 days and 40 nights without interruption. The fountains of the great deep, described in Genesis 7 verse 11, broke open in parallel. Water came from below and above simultaneously. Catastrophist geologists estimate this would have involved a combination of submarine volcanic eruptions on a global scale, tectonic plate upheaval, release of subterranean aquifers, and simultaneous atmospheric precipitation. The result was the total inundation of the known terrestrial surface, and the bodies disappeared beneath the mud. Calculate the impact of sedimentary deposition. When the water finally began to recede, after 150 days covering the face of the earth, it left behind thick layers of sediment. Geologists who adopt the diluvian paradigm interpret much of the global fossil record as the product of this event. Fossils of marine animals found on mountain peaks, including on Everest at 8,848 meters of altitude, are read by this school of thought as evidence of global inundation. Fossil graveyards with millions of creatures mixed together in rapidly buried deposits suggest catastrophic mass interment on a vast scale. And the billions of human bodies, where are they? The probable answer, according to this interpretation, is that they are down there, scattered across the deep sedimentary layers, displaced from inhabited regions by the turbulent currents of the global collapse. The low bone density of humans and the behavior of cadavers in aquatic environments make archaeological recovery extraordinarily difficult. Additionally, the areas where pre-flood humanity likely concentrated its density, presumably in the Mesopotamian region and surroundings, may today be covered by inland seas, modified river deltas, or sedimentary layers thousands of meters thick. Uniformitarian geology cannot account for it alone. Catastrophist geology proposes explanations. The debate between paradigms remains open. Observe the narrative conclusion. When the ark finally came to rest on the mountains of Ararat on the 17th day of the 7th month, as Genesis 8 verse 4 records, the landscape Noah saw through the upper window was unrecognizable. 150 days inside a closed vessel. The sounds of water, the groaning of animals, family prayer, and no human sign outside the ark in any direction. The earth was clean in the literal and biblical sense of the word. The humanity that had existed before existed no longer. 8 survivors: Noah, his wife, his 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, and his 3 daughters-in-law. 8 people restarting all of humanity. From hundreds of millions to billions of prior inhabitants, 8 remained. The implied mortality rate surpasses 99% of the species. No genocide, no war, no pandemic in subsequent human history has come close to that figure. And it is from those 8 that all of present humanity descends. Reflect on the genealogical implication. Every human being alive today, all 8 billion current inhabitants of the planet, according to the biblical narrative, descends genetically from the 3 couples who walked off the ark. All ethnic diversity, all phenotypic variation, all the linguistic expansion following Babel sprang from that tiny nucleus that disembarked at Ararat. 150 days after the flood began, 8 people stepped onto dry ground and started everything again. The first thing Noah did was build an altar. Genesis 8 verse 20 records the act. He took of every clean animal and of every clean bird and offered burnt offerings on the altar. In the midst of absolute devastation, in the midst of the silence of an emptied earth, the first gesture was one of worship. And it was in this context that God established the eternal covenant, marked by the rainbow, as Genesis 9 verses 12 through 16 records, promising never again to destroy all flesh by the waters of another flood. The promise remains visible in every rainstorm. Examine what this event means beyond the numbers. The flood was not a random punishment. It was a sentence carried out after 120 years of ignored warning, recorded in Genesis 6 and ratified in 1 Peter 3 verse 20, which confirms that the long-suffering of God waited in the days of Noah while the ark was being prepared. Mercy preceded judgment for more than a century. The offer of salvation was open throughout the entire construction of the vessel. Only 8 accepted. And perhaps that is the most disturbing statistic in the entire story. Not the number of those who died, the number of those who chose to enter. In a humanity of billions, only one family heard, believed, and acted. The door stood open for decades. The preaching was public, the construction was visible, and still 8. And the entire history of the world descends from that instant. Measure the silent legacy. Every civilization that followed, every Mesopotamian empire, every Egyptian dynasty, every Greek philosophy, every Roman conquest, every medieval reformation, every modern revolution, every contemporary technology, all of it sprouted from those 8 feet stepping onto dry land. Human history, as recorded in the biblical narrative, was reset to virtual zero from a single family. And that family carried the memory of the billions who were left behind, the memory of what it cost to ignore the warning. The numbers of the flood are not merely statistics, they are silent testimony that scale does not substitute for listening, that a crowd does not constitute reason, that the majority can be walking in exactly the wrong direction from the only door that matters. The billions who perished did not die from ignorance. They died because they chose not to enter while there was still time, and the rain fell on all of them equally.